Welcome back, boxing fans, to another great day and another great opportunity to discuss boxing with Sean on Boxing. Uh, Obviously, we did a live yesterday. If you didn't check it out, go check it out now. Never fear. It's a great conversation that we had with many people in my community, whether it was trolls or hardcore fans. Obviously, people had an opportunity to express their opinion. So, if you're interested in having that kind of conversation, next time, feel free to jump in. We are going to be going live for DAZN's upcoming fight this Sunday, my time, Saturday night, your time. Uh, Hitchens versus Lemos. A quality 140-pound matchup. And obviously, right now, the 140-pound division is killing it. A lot of great opportunities to make big fights. And this is a division that's been deep for a while now. But obviously, with the great fighters from 135 moving up, the intrigue, the money has just increased and potentially built up even bigger fights moving forward. So this is a fight that's not quite that magnitude, but the winner of this fight is definitely going to be right in the mix. And a lot of American fans are really rooting for Richard Hitchens to make a name for himself. He's got a style that will give everybody trouble, so it'll be interesting to see how he deals with the Argentinian Lemos. But today we're talking about different boxing conversations, so let's get to it. This was a quote that Canelo Alvarez put out recently, and was just discussed on Cigar Talk, another YouTube channel I'm not familiar with, where David Benavidez sat down and had an interview. And it's ironic that David Benavidez spent so much of his time basically clout chasing Canelo Alvarez and not really pushing his career. This is a guy who just beat Caleb Plant. He talked more about Canelo Alvarez than he talked about Plant and that terrific victory. Then he fought Andrade. He talked more about Canelo Alvarez than he did about undefeated two-weight world champion Demetrius Andrade. And now he's got a fight at 175 against Bostic, an ex-unified world champion. I think he was unified, if I remember off the top of my head. And this is obviously his first movement outside of the 168-pound division to the light heavyweight division. For a long time, people were talking about David Benavidez being a weight bully. It's ironic now that he's chasing Canelo Alvarez. This weight bully conversation no longer exists. It's kind of similar to Funduro and Tim Tszyu at 154 pounds. When these two Latino fighters were potentially a threat to certain fighters, they were criticized as being weight bullies. Now that they're threats to a different type of fighter, all of a sudden that weight bully conversation has no longer materialized, is no longer relevant, and something people aren't talking about. Ironically, we know that David Benavidez put out a tweet, or I don't know what you call something that you put out on X now, put out an X, but he put out a tweet to Saudi Arabian money man Turki Al-Sheikh, asking him to fund the fight between him and Canelo Alvarez, getting past that whole financial potential drawback, specifically when Canelo talked about wanting $150 to $200 million to make the fight. Not that he needs the money, but you can understand he's in a position of leverage. He's using his leverage. No different than when Floyd Mayweather asked for huge money to fight Pacquiao. No difference when Floyd Mayweather used his leverage to get big money versus Conor McGregor. No different when Fury tried to get big money and got big money to fight Alexander Usyk. You use your leverage when you can. That's the whole point of having leverage, right? If Canelo can get the money, then he deserves the money. If he can't, then he's going to have to go in a different direction, and we'll see what direction that may be. But nonetheless, when he asked for that, David Benavidez hoped that Saudi Arabia would come through and pay for that, and probably pay for it on the BBC. The irony with that situation, because when the conversation from DAZN towards David Benavidez's team came out, after Canelo Alvarez left the PBC and the possibility of making a fight with David Benavidez on DAZN against Canelo Alvarez, David Benavidez said that he wouldn't cross over to make the fight. So the clear-cut B-side won't cross over to the zone to make the fight, right? This is historically the problem with these kind of narratives. People are pointing fingers at Canelo Alvarez, ducking everybody, but yet none of these fighters are willing to actually cross the street to make a fight, right? To make the Plant fight, Canelo had to cross over. To make the Charlo fight, Canelo needs to cross over. And apparently to make the David Benavidez fight, Canelo needs to cross over. And he just re-signed to make this Jaime Munguia fight, obviously with the PBC. So he is right now currently on the PBC side. But the reality of the situation is, if the money is the issue and DAZN is offering to make the fight, then why is David Benavidez, the B side, making excuses to avoid making the fight? Now people talk about, well, see, you notice Canelo Alvarez didn't have a problem fighting Yildirim, his mandatory, or Ryder, his mandatory. But now that Benavidez is mandatory, all of a sudden he's having an issue. No, he's not having an issue. Literally, the WBC said they were going to mandate that fight. And what did David Benavidez and his team do? On hearing that in March, they were going to be in position to force Canelo Alvarez to fight them. What did they do? They signed to fight Gvozdyk at 175 pounds, walking away from that whole mandatory WBC situation, right? But people ignore all of these type of things. You can go on talk shows and clout chase Canelo Alvarez all to build up your profile, because we know that's what you're doing. You're using Canelo's name to build up your profile. Last year, you did what you should have done. You took on two great fighters and you won convincingly. That's what you need to continue to do. Gvozdyk is not that fighter. And I'm not opposed to the fight. I'm not opposed to Gvozdyk. But imagine if Canelo Alvarez was fighting Gvozdyk. Imagine the level of criticism, hate, and nonstop YouTube videos that would be made. Whereas David Benavidez is allowed to fight whoever he wants, whenever he wants, and is held to no criticism at all. Because why? Because the people that are pushing for him as an opponent for Canelo don't really support him. They're just anti-Canelo, and they're looking for whatever fighter is available that they can use to criticize and shit on Canelo Alvarez. And we've seen this historically with many different fighters filling this role. David Benavidez is just the current version, right? It's ironic because when he made this offer to Saudi Arabia kicked back and said, no, we're not going to do that because we don't really see that as a fight that we're really interested in. Because you're a weight bully, you're much bigger than Canelo, and it's not a fight that they were interested in, right? That's them, not you or other people. Obviously, the majority of us think it's a great fight and a fight that should be made. But under whose fucking narrative? Under David Benavidez? He's the one that gets to dictate? Since when does a B side dictate to an A side, right? But Saudi Arabia came back and said, no, we're not interested in that fight. But what we will do, we will give you the undisputed light heavyweight fight versus the winner of Bivol and Beterbiev. That's exactly what he'd be getting at 168, an opportunity to fight for the undisputed title, propelling him into the pound-for-pound top 10, building up his name recognition by doing his job in the ring against quality opposition. You take a gimme fight against Gvozdyk, and then you take on the winner of Bivol Beterbiev. Who could ask for something better than that? I mean, I won't say that I prefer that fight to Canelo Alvarez fight, but I do. Don't you? Wouldn't you rather see David Benavidez fight the winner of Bivol versus Beterbiev? Because who is that guy going to fight, right? You win that, you become undisputed, and there's no other big-name opponents at light heavyweight for the winner to take on. But if David Benavidez is there, now that whole title between two Russian fighters who don't really have the name recognition or the fan base in the States, now you throw David Benavidez in there, specifically with all the clout chasing he's been doing on Canelo to build his profile. Now that fight between Benavidez and the winner of Bivol Beterbiev can actually be done in the States. I don't know if it would be, Saudis might still want to do it in Saudi Arabia. But there's obviously a far bigger demand to get that fight than there has been to get the Bivol Beterbiev fight. I think it's a great fight. Stylistically, it's really, really intriguing, specifically depending on who wins, Beterbiev or Bivol. Two very different style matchups for David Benavidez. And then the irony is, if Benavidez was to beat the winner of that fight, he would become a pound-for-pound fighter. His name recognition and his prestige would be at its highest point of his career, right? At a weight class where he's obviously far more comfortable because he doesn't need to drain himself all the way down to 168. And ironically enough, the possibility of him fighting Canelo Alvarez then would probably increase, because now the fight would really be a far bigger money fight, two undisputed champions matching up. I mean, it's intriguing. But, the reality is we have to see how things unfold. But Canelo broke it down in this LA Times interview when he said, the truth is, I've always fought those who people say I don't want to fight. I'm in a position I have earned where I can do whatever I want to do. At the end of the day, I won't please them with anything. When they wanted me to fight Golovkin, I fought Golovkin. Callum Smith, Miguel Cotto, Floyd Mayweather, Austin Trout, everyone. So if you look at that, they're never pleased with anything. I will do what I want to do. And what he says is what I've been saying all along. It doesn't matter what Canelo Alvarez does. They want him to fight Charlo, but now they're afraid that Charlo can't win. So now that's a cherry pick. They want him to fight Andrade, but Andrade just got destroyed by David Benavidez, right? Exposing that narrative, exposing that it was never the kind of fight that these fans, haters, were acting as if it was. The reality is, these guys are never going to be satisfied with anything Canelo Alvarez does. Never. So at this point of his career, accomplishing what he's accomplished, a four-weight world champion, the only undisputed 168-pound champion in boxing history, right, with the best resume in boxing today, he understands you can't please everyone. So fuck them. I'm going to do what I want to do. And I'm not going to be bullied or directed by a bunch of people that it doesn't matter what I do, they're still going to be haters. And that's true, right? People pointed this out with regards to Floyd Mayweather. And it's no different with Canelo Alvarez. And that's the irony. And ironically enough, probably a lot of the people that are hating on Canelo Alvarez are the ones that were crying and moaning about the hate that Floyd Mayweather was getting back in the day, right? But that brings us to conversation and talk number 2. For some reason, there's been a big Twitter push towards Floyd Mayweather and Bud Crawford, and of course, Floyd Mayweather again with Golovkin, and his potential to actually beat one of those two fighters. And well, obviously the Bud Crawford fight is a far more intriguing fight because they are far closer to the same size and same weight. The Golovkin fight obviously generated back in the day a lot of buzz. And primarily the majority of that buzz was created by Floyd Mayweather himself, who literally used Golovkin's fame to stay relevant. And people say, well, he's the GOAT. He doesn't need Golovkin to stay relevant. But you do when you're inactive, retired, and basically a promoter who tries to get the majority of your attention off of your fighters, i.e. Tank Davis, right? When you're trying to grab the spotlight from your star fighter and Tank Davis, is it a surprise that you consistently bring up other fighters to try to stay relevant, keep your name in the newspapers, right? We know as a promoter, you need to obviously stay relevant as well because you're using your name to leverage that to push a lot of fighters like Tank Davis, Creole Moulton, right, as two examples for Floyd Mayweather. I never was pushing for a Floyd Mayweather-Golovkin fight because there was a lot of great fights for Floyd in and around his weight division. Erislandy Lara, Keith Thurman, Amir Khan, and not that he couldn't have beat any of those fighters, But stylistically, those were intriguing matchups that were very different than all the flat-footed Latino fighters that he was fighting fight after fight after fight, right? And we understand what Floyd was doing. He was fighting on the two Mexican holidays against primarily Mexican opponents to try to pull in Mexican money into his pay-per-views. It was all based on trying to generate revenue. The PBC does the same thing right now. And not that they're the only ones doing it, but ironically enough, this savior to Black American boxing and the culture, PBC and Al Heyman, you can see that they consistently use Latino and Mexican fighters to push their pay-per-views. Their cards are laden with Latino fighters consistently from the top to the bottom, right? So that tells you that this way of thinking and this way of marketing is still persistent, right? And obviously they saw the success Floyd Mayweather had, and they're bringing that to the PBC. Obviously De La Hoya and other people, they do it as well because the formula works. Some people talk about how it's a fallacy, it's not true, but yet facts are facts. If it wasn't true, then Floyd would have been fighting on Juneteenth instead of Mexican holidays. He would have been fighting in Black History Month, right? He would have primarily fought those two times of year, February and June. But he didn't. He fought in May and September. Why? Because he felt that those two dates profited. And you can disagree and you can make it a race thing. I'm not making it a race thing. I'm just telling you this is what Floyd did. We know this is what Floyd did. We know then Canelo tried to take these dates over afterwards. Him being Mexican, it made more sense. As far as this Golovkin fight, I never was a proponent for this fight. I thought for Floyd, it made more sense for him to move up to middleweight to fight Sergio Martinez, a small middleweight who primarily was a 154-pounder. He didn't really have a reach advantage over Floyd or much of a size advantage over Floyd. And that was a fight that Floyd could have won to become a 6-weight world champion, which would have been ridiculous for his legacy, right? But he chose not to do that, allowed Cotto to do it. Cotto ended up getting all the attention from that and then went on to duck Golovkin. And at this time, Floyd consistently said that Golovkin is not special, no special effects, but never showed any interest in actually making the fight. The fight could have been made. It would have been huge, a huge pay-per-view. But why wouldn't Floyd want to fight Golovkin? Because he didn't want to have to deal with Golovkin. Golovkin at that time was a guy that was being ducked and dodged by every single middleweight champion in boxing. None of the guys who held those middleweight titles stepped up to face Golovkin, whether it was a Martinez, a Cotto, a Canelo Alvarez, a Billy Joe Saunders, a Daniel Geale, a Felix Sturm, a Peter Quillen. I mean, and the list goes on. Chris Eubank blatantly ducked him. Like, middleweight division ran away from Golovkin like crazy until he got older. And once he got older, that's when they all were then eager to jump in and take him on. For Floyd Mayweather, he would have been fighting an older version of Golovkin as well. But I feel Golovkin's jab would have been too much for Floyd. Him using a shoulder roll against Golovkin's jab would have just led to him not winning the fight. You may feel different, and that's fine. I know Floyd was faster and more skilled than Golovkin, but Golovkin's jab is one of the best in boxing, and it was until basically his semi-retirement. And I feel that great jab that he had, which carried him later on in his career with its power, the punishment, the size advantage, and just the danger of the right and left hand power that he did have, kept Floyd Mayweather away. As far as the possible fight between Floyd and Bud Crawford, I mean, I'm more of a Bud Crawford fan. I think Crawford's more versatile, more exciting. So obviously I would like that fight. But the one thing that people underestimate and dismiss is the fact that Crawford also has a 2-inch reach advantage over Floyd, which would have been a significant thing moving into that fight. But as I said, I just saw this on Twitter and wanted to respond to it. Some people will take this as Floyd Mayweather hate. So no hate. Why is there hate? It's a boxing opinion and a breakdown. But let's move forward. A fight that currently is being talked about. Madrimov, the WBA champion, who just won that title, his manager talked about the possibility of Bud Crawford and Madrimov fighting, and that fight being funded by Saudi Arabia. And when you look at Crawford's career and some of the moves he's made, this is not out of character. You could easily see Bud Crawford fight Madrimov for his WBA title in Saudi Arabia for big money. We know he demanded $15 million to fight Tim Tszyu. He could easily get that $15 million if he goes to Saudi Arabia. Madrimov, a very good fighter, but most people would think not as dangerous as Tim Tszyu. It doesn't matter if he's not a big name, because this fight wouldn't be to build Crawford's name recognition in the US. The fight probably wouldn't happen in the US. So American boxing fans and a lot of the narratives that we see consistently day to day would be irrelevant with regard to this. Actually, a lot of the people who are anti-Bud Crawford and pro-PBC, they would just continue to use this to fuel the fire of criticism and hate towards Bud Crawford, even though who could blame him for chasing the money at this point of his career? You're kind of stupid if you walk away from the money. For Crawford, this would also give him one of the 154-pound titles, putting him in position to potentially rematch Errol Spence down the road, right? So, I know currently he is the mandated opponent for the WBO. Apparently, Funduro has been stripped or dropped his titles. I'm not exactly sure how that's happened so quickly, but apparently that's what I've heard. Correct me if I'm wrong. What I suggested was Tim Tszyu getting his opportunity at Redemption fighting Crawford for that vacant title. And then obviously then Spence fights Funduro for the WBC title. If Spence and Crawford both come through unscathed, now you have the perfect scenario for doing a rematch between Errol Spence and Bud Crawford in a weight class that obviously fits Errol Spence better, and with titles on the line. So it's also far more marketable than doing the rematch after coming off of a brutal knockout loss, right? Tell me if I'm wrong. This is my opinion, but it makes 100% sense. And as far as the whole Madrimov scenario and going to Saudi Arabia, if Turki Al-Sheikh is willing to fund and get behind this kind of fight, just like he's shown that he's interested in getting behind David Benavidez, taking on the light heavyweight undisputed champion, these are no-brainers. Obviously the one fight's a far bigger fight. It's for undisputed, better Biev and Bivol, especially coming off of that win, would be far bigger names than Madrimov, who the majority of American YouTubers don't even know, didn't even watch his fight to become WBA champion, and are, totally ignorant of him at all. But for Bud Crawford, it's not about the opponent, it's about the opportunity, right? And for David Benavidez, it's similar. He could make a career-high payday, become undisputed, rise high on the pound-for-pound list, and now put himself in a far stronger position to get a Canelo Alvarez fight. And we know the way Turki Al-Sheikh has been working. Even if you don't win these big opportunity fights you're given, they don't turn their backs on you, as we see with Deontay Wilder, who's now being offered a fight with Zhang, both coming off of losses to Parker. That's a great fight. Obviously, big money fight for both of them at this point of their career. They're both getting near the end. So you're happy to get a big money payday, because how much longer do you have in this game? And for Crawford, it's the same. Most of us feel that Crawford probably will retire after 2024. So a possible fight with Madrimov and then a rematch with Errol Spence is probably all we can expect as far as Bud Crawford's career is going. And of course, that's disappointing, because Crawford still looks great and looks like he could continue to be one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in boxing for the next 2 or 3 years easily. But, obviously his kids are getting older. He wants to, he's been fighting for his whole life, and he may want to look for a different path in his career. So, we will see how it goes. Obviously, he's a very strong family man, and who can hate a man for that? Another possibility, and this is obviously being pushed by Oscar De La Hoya, is Ortiz against Crawford for that WBO title. And I know that from what I hear, Golden Boy has been pushing the WBO to mandate Ortiz as the opponent, because let's think about it. Lubin is a guy with several losses. He's not a big name. He doesn't have a big fan base. Josh Kelly is a virtual unknown in the U.S. and not the kind of guy who's going to generate much attention, you know, for boxing fans. In the States. Obviously, if Bud was to go to the UK, that fight would make more sense. But in saying that, I mean, who's Josh Kelly and what has he done to earn an opportunity? The last time he had a big fight, we saw what happened to him. He got knocked out by a guy that Bud Crawford already destroyed and beat. So, you know, you got to keep that in context, right? I mean, he's not the kind of fighter that anybody's looking forward to. But a potential Virgil Ortiz Bud Crawford fight, that fight makes tons of sense in the US. You could do it on pay-per-view. It'd be funded by DAZN, you know, and it's a good fight. The other side to this coin is that Ortiz, like Boots Ennis, was offered the fight when they were ranked high by the WBO. And both of them walked away from fighting Bud Crawford for a world title fight. And you know, obviously they both chased different sanctioning bodies. Virgil chased Stanionis' WBA title, regular title, and obviously Boots Ennis went towards the IBF. It worked out obviously better for Boots because currently he is the IBF champion after the IBF stripped Bud Crawford. For Virgil Ortiz, health issues forced him to move out of the welterweight division into the 154-pound weight class. And so maybe at this time they see that they should just cash out and jump at the big money fights while they can, while he still has some name recognition, while he is still a name and undefeated. Because obviously we don't know what's left health-wise with him and you know, how that's affected him moving forward. So maybe they're thinking more about cashing out now, making sure we get big money opportunity right now while we can, and then we'll worry about the rest when we move forward. I would love this fight. Obviously, this fight sells far better in the US than a Madrimov fight, even though the Madrimov fight is against an undefeated fighter who's not having health issues, who's been at the weight class his whole career, who won his WBA title, whereas Virgil Ortiz is a guy who has been inactive, unhealthy, and so we don't really know where he's at. But, you know, that's the interesting thing about boxing. Obviously, money walks, bullshit walks. Bud Crawford's going to jump at whatever makes more sense to him financially and career-wise. But let me know what you think about all of this news. Leave your comments below. Thanks for watching. Remember, I will be going live for tomorrow's DAZN fight card. So feel free to jump in, join the community, and let's chop up boxing. Thanks for watching, everybody. Peace out, and enjoy your weekend.